Before I start to comment on the Tory administration budget report for 2013-14, I should like to set this against the backdrop of the far wider issues in the UK economy as a whole. Nationally, the economy is flatlining. We are in real danger of facing a triple-dip recession, according to a report in yesterday's Financial Times. George Osborne's much heralded and prized AAA rating was downgraded only last week. All the indications are that the Tory-led government's austerity budget is not working, with hard-working families on low incomes and lower-paid workers, not least the council's own workforce, bearing the brunt of the front-loaded cuts made by this Tory council. I didn't think this Tory government could go much lower, but I was wrong. I remember attending the council executive back on the 4th of July 2012 and speaking on localisation of council tax support, a euphemism if ever there was one. This must be the single most outrageous, ill-thought-out, unfair cut whose rationale is to further plug the funding gap to the tune of £2.67 million because of the overall Tory-led government 10% reduction in grant to local councils. Since 50% of the most vulnerable people, including pensioners, the disabled and their carers, are not affected, which is as it should be, it means the remaining 50% of claimants must bear the brunt of a 20% cut to their council tax benefit. And who are the sitting targets for this draconian cut? Some 26,500 households which are currently in receipt of council tax benefit, including low-paid workers receiving tax credits, in other words, the working poor. These individuals and families struggling to make ends meet will come into the council tax payment bracket for the very first time to the tune of, on average, £250 per year or £5 per week. When, as a claimant, you are having to make stark choices between heating or eating, it seriously beggars belief. Other choices were available to the executive. They could have taken a bold choice and supported hard-working, low-paid people in the borough, but no other option was ever really on the cards. And don't forget, we are having to find an extra £100,000 just to deliver this heinous policy. In truth, I'm hard-pressed to decide whether this, or the bedroom tax, is the most vicious of Tory government policy of all. How can you justify making people barely in a position to pay even more of their already low income? I know only too well from residents who come to one of my surgeries in Witton and Rudheath at Bethel Church, which is a centre for the Mid-Cheshire Food Bank, that this access to emergency food aid is a lifeline, a grotesque indictment of the Tory-led government policy failures. I'm sure I speak for my colleagues in the Labour group and many in the Conservative ranks who must be utterly dismayed that some 250,000 people in the UK needed to access emergency food aid in 2012. It is estimated that once this Tory-led government's welfare reform bill kicks in this April, that number will rise to 400,000 in 2013. But let's not forget whose government's policies are fundamentally flawed and hurting local people. That it should ever have come to this dire state of affairs. Our local Tory MPs, George Osborne in Tatton, Graham Evans in Weaver Vale, Stephen O'Brien in Edisbury and Stephen Mosley in Chester should hang their heads in shame. And as if this Tory council wasn't adding insult to injury, it refuses to pay the cost of £5,000 for food bank storage. And how insensitive and out of touch this Tory-led government is. Pickles poll tax, council tax rises for the poorest, will come in on the same day this April as a tax cut for millionaires. And this first cut of £10,000 coming into force in a matter of a few weeks' time is just the start. Next year, in 2014-15, a further cut of 8.5% will be administered. Does the Tory-led government and this Tory council believe that people will just sit back and let this happen? Indications are saying no. As a final point, I thought I'd share with you just one of the ways our members' budgets have been spent and leave you to judge whether this is judicious use of members' budgets. I'm referring to Frodsham Life magazine. Councillors Riley and Dawson have contributed £900 per quarter. That's £3,600 per year. I'd like to know what was the benefit to local residents, as this magazine is produced by Orbit News Limited, a private publishing and printing company, which serves local, regional and national media organisations. Are the Tories fit to have control of local taxpayers' money on the basis of their past failures and mismanagement and this back-of-a-fag-packet budget? The books may balance on paper, but does this budget stack up in reality for the residents of this borough in the long term? The answer is clearly no.